So when you watched that title pop up, you probably thought we were gonna have another good little relationship roast, and we'll have some of that in here. But we're gonna sort of go into a point I like to make. See, I'm of the belief that my content, for as much as it varies, or at least I attempt to make it vary, a lot of it is connected in the overall themes that are conveyed and the messages that you can sort of see overarch these different categories. So, for example, when I say that you have false hope and a hex, understand when I say that it means you don't give in to the idea that this could never happen. In fact, when you have it seem as if it's going to happen, it entices you to believe this is finally going to change. And suddenly it's the complete reverse. With seemingly no provocation, because you'll watch the person say something that sounds different from other people. And you're going to see this as we go further into this. So before we get to the romance stuff that everybody loves so much, we have to eat our vegetables and go through some of the voice acting stuff. So I've made it very clear that I'm someone who, whenever my voice is included in the project, writes it, directs it, scripts it, just pretty much does most of the, I think if we objectively are speaking, does most of the work. But in spite of this, I'm able to still recognize the crucial role that voice actors play in making something, for lack of a more wanting term, come to life, or phrase rather. And for that reason, I try to be accommodating of their individual needs. Sometimes people are involved with more stuff than others. Sometimes people are more forgetful than others. It happens. But what I found very strange is that in the course of doing projects, I've always come to the conclusion that whenever you have someone that quits or that flakes out or just decides to not do their stuff for whatever reason, you can get someone to replace them. Whether you think the person's slightly worse, slightly better, you can still find someone else who is adequate enough to meet that same role. But this is something I think most people would commonly agree with. It's up to the VA to determine whether they're going to work on your project or not. And when you go on a website like Casting Call or any of these other places where you have over 20,000 people literally who, whether they're male or female, say, I want to be a voice actor, I want to get involved with this stuff, you think to yourself, well, there's no way in hell that I can spend months or a year without having, VAs to adequately suffice, this role I want them to play. So recently, I started a side project I've only completed the pilot of, and I have a series of scripts that are sequels to this and kind of build on some of the stuff that's established in the pilot. And so, to make a long story short, I had one voice actor who did a role. They went on some long, drawn out hiatus, and I had to go look for another person. But I also had a couple of other characters that were female that I cannot do the voices of for obvious reasons. So I go on here and I put up some various casting calls. I get no response, and it literally was like living in the Twilight Zone because I couldn't believe in my mind that I could go on a site again with thousands of people who say whether they have a penis or a vagina, I want to be a voice actor, and get next to nothing as far as the reception. I did get one person several weeks back, and you're seeing the message on the screen, who you're looking at this, right, and you can tell they're showing some basic level of interest. Ultimately this pans out to nothing, but when you see this person, after weeks of not hearing anything from other people, you really start to think in your head, hey, this can change. Hey, this is possibly going to get better. And this is the false hope I'm talking about, where these people who, they're not like, they have the ability to practice some basic level of foresight, so they can tell when they see your content whether they want to get involved or not. They know full well, or at least some part of them knows, that they have no interest in doing this, but they're going to tug your chain to make themselves feel better and wanted, like the little narcissistic pricks that they are. And then, you, by virtue of just being a person who has to, is at the mercy of VAs, has to put up with this. And before someone says you're attacking this profession, no, no. I'm not going after people who sign up for something and then do it. I've had plenty of people do that. I respect that they're serious about their craft. I'm saying that if you come on to my project and you indicate some level of interest, just to say thanks but no thanks, after I've spent weeks, if not months, trying to get someone to fulfill this role, make accommodations based off of what the person says, I feel I should have the right to get pissed off. Now, I won't always express it because, I like to watch what I say in text, but you get the point that it's still something that it goes both ways. Where if you're entitled to, deny being interested in doing something I want to do, even though you've shown interest by messaging me and asking all these little stupid questions, I'm entitled to also say, hey, this was a ridiculous thing you did here. And, this goes back to the false hope premise. And here's another one. Now, this person isn't someone I would get as upset with because I sought them out. And usually when that's the case, I'm not as likely to get mad. But it's that same thing. Hey there, thanks for the kind words. I'd be happy to hear more about your project. Tell me about it. Again, that does not sound like someone who is thinking in their head the response you see literally later on that day. Sounds interesting. Unfortunately, my project roster is pretty full for things I haven't already auditioned for. Well, if that's the case, why did you ask to hear more about it? What, did you think we were going to have a friendly chat and you were going to suddenly, become colleagues with me as I continue my hunt for someone to do this role? And look, this person, to be fair to them, isn't the only one who thinks this way. You can actually see the same thing in this response here. This is an individual who says they're freelance, they might do commission stuff later on, but they're saying they're curious to see what the project that you're working on is and that they'd like more information, and they thank me for reaching out. So when you get that kind of response, I think you can figure why someone would think, okay, this is a person who might possibly want to do this. Now, they asked to see the pilot. I sent it to them. No response. So, here's what you have to realize about that. When someone asks to see something and you send it to them, and the person chooses not to say anything back, they were either turned off by what they saw, or they're of the position that what you made was not worthy of their response or otherwise their involvement. So they're doing their little exercising a big ego. But do you see what I'm talking about here? Where there's again going back to this false hope thing. These people say, I want to hear more about this. I'm curious, blah, 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 blah. And you go, oh man, this is finally over. We're finally going to, see a conclusion to this. And it ends up being the complete opposite, where you end up exactly where you were, except with your proverbial collar tugged a little bit. So when you look at these messages, I try to explain, I believe that we as individuals can only be so, conscious, or whether we're only in control of certain things. I can go out and private message 30,000 voice actors for this project, but that doesn't mean a single one is going to respond. And if they do, it doesn't mean that they're going to show enough interest to actually record for me. You have to understand what I find so frustrating about the interactions of people is that depending on what our perspective is, we have a tendency to demonize the other person involved. So, for example, when I had a lot of guys would come on my page and say, hey, this happened to me with these chicks, they would, get told, oh, you have to do this stuff. And it was almost as if the role you have as a human being, a person who, whether you like it or not, is impacted by the behaviors and decisions of the people around you, was thrown out the window. Like if you could turn into Mesmero and control the minds of the opposite sex if you just put on certain clothes or smell this way or speak this way. This really it's like it's false hope, but it's combined with this over exaggeration of your powers as a regular human being who pisses and craps like everybody else. I just had an epiphany because I was sitting here thinking. I said, you know what? When these let me lead by saying this. When I was getting turned down a lot of times when I would, go out and ask for dates and whatnot. A common line I would hear by by some of these females or women or whatever was something to the effect of, "Oh, the right person is out there." And if you watch the Proof Romance is a Scam video, you'll even actually see where someone said something like verbatim that was like that. But that used to piss me off and it would annoy me, and it's just them being assumeful. But I realized that's not actually something that doesn't make sense. See, these people in their heart of hearts know that they don't want to believe that someone is going to always be stuck with people like them who kind of like wag their tail a little bit and then sort of, bail out when it's time to actually do something. So they have to convince themselves in their heads, and they have to basically say to themselves through speaking to you that you will be okay, and that them, choosing to be selective as all hell will have no lasting long-term ramifications and or impact, because this allows them to alleviate themselves from being guilt-ridden over their own actions. And this is the same thing with the voice actors. When they turn you down, they're not doing it because they want to destroy the project. And I never assume that, but they're doing it and they're thinking to themselves, "Oh, I'm just one VA. He'll encounter somebody else. You have 20,000 people on that site. There's no way, even though a good chunk of them are either inactive and, I've been spoken to if they are, there's no way that all those people are going to say no." So, they turn this stuff into that numbers game because they have to convince themselves, again, through interacting with you, a person who, has already said, maybe this could happen, but I'm really doubtful, like kind of like the pessimism, the earned pessimism, as I like to refer to it. They have to tell you this stuff because in their heads they're really trying to convince themselves and not you. But I realize that when I talk about being cynical on whether VAs are going to show up or sign up for something, because right now as we speak I'm talking to one VA who asked some questions and sort of, we'll sort this out. But as I'm sitting here debating, messaging this person back, I'm thinking in my head, when is going to be the cutoff point where they do what these other three people have done, and go thanks but no thanks after asking for more and more info to make you think they have some slight inch of an interest in what you're doing. And it's, someone who's like looking at this stuff objectively would say, when you assume bad things about people, this happens. But these assumptions are earned. You can't look at someone who's gone through 50 different VAs, which I'm not saying it's been that high, but let's say several dozen VAs of just back to back, saying I won't do this, whatever, and then, be surprised when that person thinks the next person that comes around is likely going to do the exact same thing. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter how I speak to them. The only thing I can change is whether or not they're aware that I would be interested in them wanting to be honest. That's the only thing I can make different by interacting with this person. Them choosing to get involved is all up to them. And this is the exact same thing with the chick stuff. A person who says it's probably not going to happen isn't, and they have earned disillusion, isn't saying that because there's some naysayer and they're negative about everything or just most things or whatever the hell. They're doing that because they have put themselves in the ring of talking to so many of these people and getting the same results that it would be almost foolish to think that after 50 to 90 if plus people doing the exact same thing, no matter what you do, no matter how many accommodations you make, no matter what different strategists you listen to online or in person, that this one is suddenly going to be the individual who is separate from the rest of the pack. It's like if you're a teacher and you're grading your students' papers. Let's say you have about maybe 3 separate classes of 30 students, right? And the first 2 full classes of 60 people all fail this test. And you go, okay, well, the next class is likely going to get it. And then you go and you do this 3rd class and 1 person passes it. So out of these 90 people, only 1 is passed. You're reasonably going to think in your head, hey, maybe most kids or most people in this class can't pass this test because most of them presently haven't. So, when you say, I don't think I'm going to get a VA to do this. I don't think I'm going to get, someone to like me back, whatever the hell, because we already know the gold digger wars that are going on here online. You're not saying that because you're a negative person. You're saying that because you have reasonably assessed your circumstance and no longer delude yourself with false hope and beliefs that are not based in reality. Your belief that it's not going to be different, whether it's the VA situation or the chick thing, romance crap, it's all based around what you've experienced. Again, the Benjamin Franklin quote, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. Don't believe anyone who tells you this is going to change because year goes by and people will switch accordingly because, the natural order of things. When you go out and you try to talk to voice actors and they all respond with like the same kind of laziness and refusal to do anything, don't become convinced that there's a high chance or that there's a more than realistic chance that the next person is going to be any different. And, still go out and try because there's always that smidge. But if you don't blame yourself. Blame the system that led you to that position, because if you hadn't have been through the ringer of getting, spit in the face every time you extended a hand and having people effectively, show the opposite of your interest, whether on a professional or sexual level, you wouldn't have the position that you presently have. So it's, again, earned disdain. So, I think about a lot of the reception that I had for the chick stuff, right? And you gotta understand, I can look at that stuff and I can say to myself, you know what? I get where someone would be very serious about the people they get involved with, even if I think that a lot of them oversaturate how important, like just certain qualities or whatnot. I still can understand why you would be really picky to an extent. I don't agree with it, and I sure as hell think it's been used to curtail the, dare I say, romantic ambitions of some of my colleagues and myself. But I still can, in my head, rationalize it in that manner, even if I think the people who are doing it are doing something really stupid. But with this voice actor stuff, we're talking about a person who says, I want to be in this profession. And a person that, when I sent that pilot, I didn't send it because I thought it was the most well-made thing out there. I point out errors myself, when I've privately screened it. But I sent it as proof that I was someone who was serious about what I say. That when I do a script, I work on it, and that I also try to make sure it eventually sees completion, whether that's in a month, 2, 3, 4, maybe even a year. It's going to come out. And that's kind of the ironic thing of going back to that person's channel, the one that when she was sent the pilot didn't say anything. If you go on there, she hasn't like put up a video in months. It just like, is making all kind of excuses to not do anything. So it's a really nice irony there. In the instance of, these people, whether it's, just to wrap this up, whether it's the chick stuff, whether it's, projects, you gotta understand one basic thing. You as an individual can only do so much. You cannot make a woman date you. You cannot make a voice actor record for you. You can make a pitch. You can control what you say. You can try to make accommodations as I demonstrated here, where I was talking about, hey, we can make this work, and hey, I give people weeks to do this stuff. But you ultimately cannot pull the lever for them on whether they want to get involved with you sexually or professionally. And for anyone who has believed that at times, like I have, you've been fooled, scammed, tricked, bamboozled, hoaxed, conned, baited, snared, and hoodwinked. It's as simple as that.